Okay, so you've sent us a really interesting word for today's deep dive. Arduous.
Mm.
And it feels familiar, right? But looking through all the sources you shared, we've got dictionary definitions from everywhere. Merriam-Webster, Wiktionary, Cambridge.
Etymology sites too, Etymonline, even a Reddit thread.
Right, plus usage examples and this article from EasyPat, looking at the nuances, it really suggests there's, well, more going on than just saying something is difficult.
Exactly. That's the mission here, isn't it? To get beyond just like a simple definition swap.
Yeah, to really unpack what makes
Yeah.
arduous arduous.
But I think what really comes through from all these different angles is this core idea of prolonged effort, endurance.
So let's start there. The basic definitions Merriam-Webster says hard to accomplish or achieve, marked by great labor or effort. Pretty standard.
Sure, but that EastPat article you mentioned, that added a really helpful layer, I thought.
It did. It made this distinction, saying that while difficult, challenging, or hard might overlap, arduous specifically implies a greater degree of sustained effort and exertion.
That's the key, isn't it? Sustained effort. It's not just tough in the moment. It's tough over time.
The examples they used were great for illustrating that.
Yeah, totally. Like a jigsaw puzzle. Difficult, maybe. Learning Spanish. Challenging, sure. Lifting a heavy box. Hard.
But hiking through a dense jungle for days, fighting off bugs, the heat, just pushing through.
It's arduous. It's the duration, the persistence required.
Makes total sense. And the Word Up app had those pro tips. It often involves physical effort, but also can have this emotional weight, and it's usually time-consuming.
Which all feeds back into that same idea, right? Physical, emotional takes a long time. It turns to something demanding, something extended.
The ECPAD piece also mentioned the tone, that arduous feels a bit more formal.
Yeah, it does. Using it kind of emphasizes the seriousness, the sheer scale of the undertaking. You wouldn't necessarily use it for, getting the lid off a stubborn jar.
Probably not. So, hey, let's connect this to the roots. Where does it actually come from?
Well, the sources point pretty clearly to Latin. Arduous.
Arduous, meaning?
High, steep, and then figuratively, difficult, hard to reach.
High or steep, that's fascinating.
And at Online and the Reddit thread trace it back even further. Proto-Indo-European root, red, just meaning high.
So it's fundamentally about height, like literally.
Seems so. You can almost picture it, can't you? Something high, something steep. It takes a long, hard climb to get up there.
And that physical struggle becomes a metaphor for any kind of sustained effort.
Exactly. The sources, like Merriam-Webster, say the first English use, back in the 1530s, was actually that figurative sense, strenuous, hard to do.
Oh, interesting. So the figurative came first in English.
Apparently. The more literal sense of high or steep seems to have popped up again later, around 1709. They mention Alexander Pope using it.
Huh. Wonder why it swung back like that. Maybe the image of a steep climb just really resonated then.
Could be. That Reddit post you mentioned, someone was using arduous for trying to get unemployment benefits.
Right, and they were surprised it originally meant high.
Yeah, and they quoted the Century Dictionary linking that severe and protracted effort directly back to the idea of steep climbing. It's a powerful image.
It really is. Okay, so let's see how this plays out in practice. The Merriam-Webster examples are pretty revealing. Loads of physical stuff.
Like an arduous descent, arduous hike, arduous climb.
Even the Perseverance rover's arduous trek on Mars.
Yeah.
Or long journeys like through the desert or eels migrating.
These all scream sustained physical effort against obstacles, don't they? It's not just one tricky step, it's the whole long slog.
Totally. And then there's training and work.
Yeah.
A long and arduous training program.
Or the arduous work of, say, making candles or soap by hand back in the day. Or even just tough restaurant work.
Yeah, and arduous tasks like rebuilding something, putting together a huge dictionary, editing a manuscript.
And these aren't just physical, right? Editing a book or compiling a dictionary, that's immense mental effort, sustained focus over a long, long time.
True. It applies really broadly. We also see it for processes.
Like the arduous IVF journey.
Or the arduous road back for an athlete after an injury, trying to get back to the major leagues. Or a team's arduous climb back to the playoffs.
It suggests overcoming a whole series of obstacles step by step, demanding that resilience we talked about.
Even events like an arduous speedboat race suggest endurance over just speed, maybe? Or an arduous battle, obviously implying prolonged conflict.
It seems like the common thread is this complexity, this multi-stage difficulty that just keeps going. The example of cancer cells metastasizing being an arduous journey was Wow.
Yeah, that was striking. It frames this biological process as this incredibly complex, difficult series of steps.
And that historical one you mentioned earlier about women's long and arduous labor making household goods.
Right, before mass production. It really puts things in perspective. What we consider normal chores now could have been incredibly demanding back then.
Definitely shows how context matters for what feels arduous.
So if we look at synonyms, quickly, difficult, challenging, strenuous, laborious, demanding, exhausting.
They all touch on difficulty, but arduous, as we've seen, really highlights that sustained taxing nature, that extra layer of endurance.
And we have the related words too, like arduously, arduousness, and even unarduous.
Right, showing the concept is well established enough to have its own variations.
And finally, let's just circle back to that emotional side. The word uptip and the ECPAD article both mentioned it.
Yeah, that emotional weight. Things like dealing with grief or recovering from trauma over a long period.
Those can absolutely be described as arduous. It's not physical climbing, but it's a long uphill emotional struggle.
Requires huge amounts of inner strength, resilience, just sustained emotional effort.
So wrapping this all up, it feels like arduous is really quite specific. It's not just a fancier word for hard.
No, definitely not. It carries that weight of time, of significant sustained effort, often against considerable difficulty. That original high, steep idea really does seem to linger.
It's about the long haul, the climb, whether that's up a mountain or through a really tough period in life.
Precisely. It acknowledges that some challenges aren't just difficult, they're draining. They require sticking power.
So here's a thought for you listening. Think about something you're working towards, maybe a long-term goal or project. What if you called it arduous? Would acknowledging the sustained effort it really takes, the climb involved, change how you feel about the process? Or maybe how you feel when you finally achieve it?
That's interesting. Does framing it that way give you more respect for the effort, maybe?
Yeah.
Help you persevere?
Perhaps. Maybe there's an arduousness hidden in everyday long-term efforts that we could, appreciate a bit more. Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you a much richer sense of what arduous is all about. Until next time.